On a warm summer day in Orlando, Florida, a grandmother picked up her phone and made a call that would soon capture the attention of the entire nation. "There's something wrong. It smells like there's been a dead body in the damn car." It was July 15, 2008, and the caller was Caylee Anthony, reporting her 2-year-old granddaughter, Caylee, missing. What no one realized at that moment was that the story about to unfold would become one of the most polarizing and perplexing criminal cases in American history. A missing child, a mother who partied instead of searching, and a courtroom that turned into a stage watched by millions. This is the story of Caylee Anthony and how a family tragedy became a national obsession. To the outside world, Caylee Anthony appeared to be an ordinary young mother. She lived with her parents, George and Cindy Anthony, in their quiet Orlando home, raising her 2-year-old daughter, Caylee Marie Anthony. Caylee was described by those who knew her as bright, cheerful, and endlessly curious, a child always smiling in photos, her big brown eyes full of life. But behind the smiles and family photos, tensions simmered within the Anthony household. Caylee, just 22 years old, had no steady job and no clear plan for her future. She frequently clashed with her mother over money, parenting, and her social life. On the morning of June 16, 2008, George Anthony later recalled seeing Caylee and Caylee leaving the house together. Caylee said they were heading out to spend the day with Zanny the nanny, a woman named Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez, who she claimed often looked after Caylee. That was the last confirmed sighting of Caylee alive. Over the following days, Caylee's behavior would raise alarm, though not immediately. She stopped staying at home. She told her parents she was busy working at Universal Studios, where she claimed to have a job in event coordination. In reality, she hadn't worked there in years.
Instead, she spent time with friends, attended parties, and posted cheerful photos online, smiling, dancing, posing, drinking. For 31 days, no one in the Anthony family saw or heard from Caylee. Whenever Cindy asked about her granddaughter, Caylee offered excuses. Caylee was with the nanny, at the beach, visiting friends, or too busy to come to the phone. It wasn't until July 15, 2008, that Cindy Anthony made that fateful 911 call. "I found my daughter's car today, and it smells like there's been a dead body in the damn car." Police arrived at the Anthony home that evening. Caylee's white Pontiac Sunfire had been towed from an impound lot days earlier after being abandoned. Inside, investigators noticed a strong and mistakable odor that experienced officers immediately associated with human decomposition. The trunk contained a trash bag filled with old pizza and debris, but forensic technicians later noted that the scent and chemical traces were consistent with decomposition, not just spoiled food. Detectives also found hair strands, a stain on the trunk's carpet, and traces of chloroform. Still, no body had been found. When questioned, Caylee calmly insisted that Caylee had been kidnapped by her nanny, Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez, weeks earlier, that she had been too frightened to report it. Detectives followed up immediately. They visited the apartment Caylee claimed belonged to Zenaida. It was vacant. They searched employment records at Universal Studios. Caylee had not worked there in years. When detectives asked her to lead them to her office at Universal, she agreed, walking confidently through the hallways until she finally stopped, turned, and admitted quietly, "I don't work here." It was a moment investigators later described as a turning point, the realization that nearly everything Caylee had said was a lie. On July 16, 2008, Caylee Anthony was arrested on charges of child neglect, providing false information, and obstruction. The following day, her first mugshot was released to the press and the media frenzy began. Within hours, Caylee Anthony's face appeared on television screens across the nation. Photos of the smiling toddler, paired with headlines like "Missing for a Month" and "Where's Caylee?" captivated viewers. Too many. The story seemed almost unthinkable, a young mother dancing at clubs while her child was missing. But to investigators, it was now a race against time. Where was Caylee Anthony? As the sun rose over Orlando the morning after Caylee's arrest, investigators began what would become one of the most exhaustive searches in Florida's history. A 2-year-old child was missing, a mother was lying, and a community was mobilizing. From that day forward, the search for Caylee Anthony turned from a family issue into a public crusade. By late July 2008, hundreds of volunteers had joined the effort to find Caylee. Local businesses donated supplies. Posters bearing her photo covered lampposts, storefronts, and car windows across Orlando. Television networks picked up the story. Nancy Grace, HLN, and national outlets ran nightly coverage. The missing child had a name, a face, and a nation desperate for answers. But behind the headlines, investigators struggled to make sense of Casey's ever-shifting story. In a series of police interviews, Casey's narrative continued to evolve. She named friends, workplaces, and babysitters, all of which led nowhere. Detectives tracked each lead carefully. No one named Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez had ever cared for Caylee. No phone calls, no emails, no photos existed to support Casey's claims. When confronted with this, Casey showed little emotion. She insisted she was doing everything she could to bring her daughter home, yet provided no verifiable information that could help find her. To detectives, the contradictions were overwhelming. To the public, the contradictions were infuriating. Meanwhile, Caylee Anthony remained vocal and visible. She appeared on talk shows, pleaded with the public for help, and maintained that her daughter was innocent. Caylee believed Caylee was alive, perhaps kidnapped, perhaps hidden but not dead. Her faith in Casey, though shaken, did not break. Her husband George, a former police officer, began to show signs of quiet distress. He rarely spoke publicly, but those close to him said he seemed deeply uneasy about what he knew and what he feared might be true. As public attention intensified, forensic evidence from Casey's car began to tell its own story. Tests conducted by the FBI and Oak Ridge National Laboratory detected unusually high levels of chloroform in the trunk's air samples, a chemical sometimes used as a cleaning agent, but also associated with sedation. A single hair strand, consistent with Caylee's DNA, was found in the trunk. Microscopic analysis revealed a distinctive dark band near the root known in forensic science as a post-mortem hairband. It forms only after death. Though no body had been recovered, investigators were beginning to suspect that the search would not end with a rescue but with a recovery. Despite mounting evidence, Caylee Anthony was released on bond in August 2008 after a California bail bondsman posted her $500,000 bail. As she walked out of jail, protesters lined the streets outside, shouting "Where's Caylee?" and holding signs that read "Baby Killer." For many Americans, Casey's calm demeanor, smiling, waving, wearing designer sunglasses became a symbol of something deeply unsettling. They saw no grief, no urgency, no remorse. What they didn't see was that inside the Orange County Sheriff's Office, investigators were quietly preparing for a grim outcome. In late August, cadaver dogs trained to detect human remains were brought to the Anthony home. Both dogs independently alerted near to locations, the backyard and the trunk of Casey's car. Excavation teams found no remains in the yard, but the alerts added weight to the growing theory that Caylee was no longer alive. Investigators began to map out Casey's phone records, pings, and travel routes during the crucial days after June 16. The site was overgrown with dense brush and standing water from summer rains. Search teams combed it multiple times but found nothing. Nearly 6 months later, on December 11, 2008, an unexpected call came into 911. A county utility worker, Roy Kronk, reported discovering a suspicious object while relieving himself in a wooded area near Suburban Drive. It appeared to be a small skull, partially hidden in a black trash bag. Deputies arrived quickly and soon confirmed what everyone feared. Scattered within the undergrowth were skeletal remains belonging to a child. Near the skull, detectives found a blanket, duct tape, and a small piece of clothing consistent with what Caylee had last been seen wearing. DNA testing would soon confirm it. The remains were Caylee Marie Anthony. With Caylee's body found, the case shifted from a search operation to a homicide investigation, and all attention turned once again to her mother. Caylee Anthony was rearrested, this time on charges of first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, and providing false information to law enforcement. The state of Florida announced its intention to seek the death penalty. The girl once seen smiling in photographs with her daughter was now facing execution. Across the country, the discovery reignited outrage. Television networks broadcast continuous coverage. Online forums filled with theories, debates, but in the justice system, she was still presumed innocent and preparing to fight for her life. As the prosecution built its case and the defense planned its counterattack, the world waited for the trial that would come to define a generation of televised crime. The trial of Caylee Anthony, America's most hated mom. It was May 2011, nearly 3 years after the disappearance of Caylee Marie Anthony. The case had consumed the country. Now, inside the Orange County Courthouse, 12 jurors were about to decide whether Caylee Anthony, a 25-year-old mother, would live or die. The prosecution, led by Jeff Ashton and Linda Drain Burdick, presented a clear and devastating theory. Motive, prosecutors claimed, was simple. Caylee wanted freedom. Freedom from responsibility, from motherhood, from the constraints of her family life. They painted her as a young woman living a double life, One moment a devoted mother, the next, partying, drinking, and dancing in nightclubs while her daughter lay dead. The prosecution promised to prove that this was not an accident. It was a premeditated murder. Then came the defense led by attorney Jose Baez. Baez delivered an opening statement that shocked the courtroom. He claimed Caylee's death was accidental, not murder. According to Baez, Caylee had drowned in the family swimming pool on June 16, 2008, and Casey, in panic, hid the body with the help of her father, George Anthony. He went further, alleging years of sexual abuse by George, which he said explained Casey's strange behavior, her detachment, and her lies. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. The Anthony family, sitting in the gallery, looked stunned. George shook his head, visibly emotional. The defense narrative had changed everything. Over the following weeks, the prosecution presented more than 400 pieces of evidence and called dozens of witnesses. They showed jurors photographs of the trash bag, blanket, and duct tape found with Caylee's remains. They detailed the odor of decomposition detected in Casey's car. They introduced Google search history from the Anthony home computer searches for chloroform, neck breaking, and how to make chloroform. Jurors listened closely, face tense and still. The prosecution also focused on Casey's behavior in the 31 days when Caylee was missing. She went shopping. She got a tattoo that read Bella Vita Italian for a beautiful life. She attended parties, smiling in photographs taken just days after Caylee's disappearance. To the state, these were not the actions of a grieving mother. They were signs of guilt. Experts from the FBI and Oak Ridge National Laboratory testified that air samples from the trunk of Casey's car showed compounds consistent with human decomposition. A forensic entomologist, a scientist specializing in insects associated with decay, described how the presence of certain flies and larvae supported the theory that a body had been inside the vehicle. Then came the hair evidence, a strand microscopically similar to Caylee's, showing the post-mortem band found in the trunk. Each detail reinforced the state's theory that Caylee died in that car before being dumped in the woods. When it was the defense's turn, Jose Baez sought to dismantle the forensic foundation of the prosecution's case. He argued that the science was speculative, that no body fluids or fingerprints tied Casey to the scene. He called the chloroform data unreliable, suggesting the high levels could have come from cleaning products. He brought in Dr. Werner Spitz, a respected pathologist, who criticized the medical examiner's conclusions and stated there was no proof Caylee had been murdered. The defense returned to its central theme, Caylee drowned. The family covered it up out of fear and dysfunction. Baez portrayed Casey as a victim of a lifetime of control, trauma, and abuse, not a cold-blooded killer. When George Anthony took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. He denied all accusations of abuse. He insisted he never helped hide Caylee's body, never covered up any crime. His voice trembled as he described the day his granddaughter vanished. He told jurors he wanted only the truth, that he'd lost his granddaughter and was now losing his daughter to lies. The tension between Casey and her father was visible. At times, she avoided his gaze entirely. Outside the courthouse, media trucks filled entire city blocks. Spectators camped on sidewalks for a chance to witness the trial. Cable networks broadcast every moment live. Commentators debated guilt and innocence nightly. For many, the courtroom had become theater, a blend of tragedy, scandal, and spectacle. But for the jurors inside, it was a matter of life and death. After 6 weeks of testimony, the attorneys presented their closing arguments. Prosecutor Jeff Ashton reminded jurors of the lies, the evidence, and the image of duct tape wrapped across a child's skull. He said the truth was simple. Casey Anthony murdered her daughter because Caylee was in the way. When Jose Baez spoke, he reminded the jury that there was no direct evidence of murder, no witness, no confession, no clear cause of death. Voice rose slightly as he said, "If you hate her, if you think she's a liar, fine. But that doesn't make her a murderer." The courtroom fell silent. Now, the decision was in the jury's hands. On July 5, 2011, after 10 hours and 40 minutes of deliberation, the jury returned. Casey Anthony stood as the clerk read the verdict. On the charge of first-degree murder, not guilty. On the charge of aggravated manslaughter of a child, not guilty. On the charge of aggravated child abuse, not guilty. On 4 counts of providing false information to law enforcement, guilty. Casey Anthony wept softly as the words were read. Outside, the crowd erupted in anger. Chants of justice for Caylee. Reporters described the reaction as disbelief, even outrage. On July 17, 2011, Casey Anthony was released from jail, having served her sentence for lying to police. She left under heavy security, disappearing into seclusion. The verdict divided America. Some saw it as a failure of justice, others as proof that emotion should never outweigh evidence. To this day, no one else has been charged in connection with Caylee's death. The cause of death remains officially undetermined. The Caylee Anthony trial changed the landscape of American true crime media. It exposed the power of televised trials, the danger of public judgment, and the limits of forensic certainty. For many, it left a haunting question: if not her, then who? The story of Caylee Anthony remains one of loss, a reminder that truth and justice do not always align neatly in the eyes of the law, and that sometimes the greatest mystery is not what happened, but how a nation came to care so deeply about a single case. The morning after the verdict, America woke up divided. On television, headlines read, "Caylee Anthony walks free, no justice for Caylee." Talk shows, legal analysts, and news anchors debated one question: how could the jury find her not guilty? For many, it wasn't just about the law, it was about morality.